Hi, good morning. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Brian. I'm from the Ramon V. Del Rosario College of Business in the La Salle University in Manila. I think a lot of you, anybody here has been to the Philippines? Okay, good. So only a handful, not a lot. I hopefully want to have more people visiting the Philippines. Anyway, just to start off, I would like to thank the Faculty of Business and Economics of UGM for inviting me today here for the International Week. I have been here like a couple of times before, and before we had what you call the AUNBE, the AGBEP, which is now AUNBE, is the network of ASEAN EU and University Business Schools. So it is nice to be back here and to be part of the International Week as well. So that is the logo of my school. De La Salle University is a private Catholic university in the Philippines. In the Philippines, we have a lot of private schools. We have very few state universities, and of course, since I am here, I will be promoting my school. It's the top business school. Okay, no, no, but anyway, so we have a lot of really good business schools as well. But since I'm the dean, I have to, right? So, or else I'll lose my job. Okay, so I'm Brian. So today we'll talk about entrepreneurship and innovation in ASEAN. And I will be talking about some indicators that are being used. And if you want to do research or you want to pursue research in innovation or entrepreneurship, there are some indices that you can use. I do a lot of quantitative techniques. I'm more quant. I do a lot of stats. So a lot of these things are usually quantitative. But of course, we will not be doing statistics. We will not do we will not do an econometric modeling today. But at least just to talk about some of the indices that are being used in order to measure and compare like the different countries of ASEAN when it comes to innovation and entrepreneurship. When we talk about innovation, okay, what comes to your mind? I will ask Eric because he's the guy in charge of me today. Okay, for the past 2 days he has been like picking me up from the airport. What do you mean by innovation? Again, something new, a new model of business. What else? What can you anything about innovation? Creativity, yes. Any words? Yes, yes, responding to customers. So when we talk about innovation, we basically want to improve something. What is the difference between innovation and invention? Yes. So making totally something new. Okay. All of you here are very young. Can you think of an invention for the 21st century? An invention. 21st century invention. All of you are already born like in when were you born? Like 20 something, right? No, or so can you think of an invention of the 21st century? Invention. Truly new. Huh? Social media are this totally new because at least yeah, social media, but I think the for example, for social media now we have a lot of new things, but even in the 90s we already have some sort of social media, and the apps most likely, yeah, they would be quite, are they totally inventions? But anyway, there are some new things. Yes. Yeah, self-driving cars. A lot of these things again are innovations because we have some parts which are, it's still a car, but it's still just no driver. It's still an app. Okay, so we have this thing. So basically robots. So as you can see, like apps and all of these things, this will be innovations of something. So it's when it's a little more difficult to think of an invention. A lot of the things that we have right now are inventions. For example, self-driving cars are innovations. We already have something like the apps. We might have apps in the 1990s. You know, like before Facebook. What now? All of you might be using Instagram. You have Facebook. Before Facebook, did you have Friendster? No. Okay. He's smiling. Did you have Friendster? Okay. Okay, so as you can see, a lot of these things are innovation. So when we talk about innovation, it's basically a lot of things. Okay, you talk about the growth. You talk about ideas, you have to talk about new things, you talk about the development, you talk about creativity. So when you talk about innovation, how do you really, what does innovation stand for? How do we actually measure innovation? Usually, for example, when we talk about innovation, we want to do something new. We want to add on something. All of you here are business students. Most of you are business students and economic students. So you have a course in operations management. So you know Kaizen. Kaizen. What's Kaizen? Kaizen. 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 It's a Japanese word. What's Kaizen? Yes. Kaizen is related to the robots. What else? For those who have internet connection, Kaizen, Kaizen, it means continuous improvement. Okay? So in operations management, you want to continuously improve. So basically, what we're doing, I like a lot of Japanese terms because when I was young, when I was student, I was in Japan for 7 years when I was studying. So, and I did operations research for my studies for my doctoral degree. So we do a lot of productivity, efficiency, and all of those things. So when we talk about innovation, one of the things that for me is important will be Kaizen, continuous improvement. How can you continuously improve? For example, why are you here today? Why did you take part in this session? In order for you to, yeah, to improve your knowledge. So what you are doing basically right now is an example of Kaizen. And in order for you to become more innovative in the future, you have to continuously improve yourselves. So when we talk about innovation, this is now what I am going to focus on for the first part. We are going to talk about an index that is very essential when you're doing research and when you're learning about different countries. Have you heard of this? The Global Innovation Index. We have what you call the Global Innovation Index. So for those who are doing studies, if you want to do research, if you want data, this is a very good source of data when it comes to innovation. Okay? So you can search it. It's about the Global Innovation Index. This is done by like INSEAD, Cornell, and WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Office. So the Global Innovation Index, it is basically an index of different countries, and they measure the level of innovation quantitatively. Of course, we all know that innovation cannot be quantified, of course, 100%, but at least these are some indicators that would help assess the level of innovation of a particular country or economy. And of course, the global leaders are, we have number one will be Switzerland, the second one will be the Netherlands, then you have Sweden, then you have the United Kingdom, and in Southeast Asia, the number one in Southeast Asia, and the fifth in the world will be Singapore. How are these, what do you call that, leaders measured? How do we measure innovation from the point of view of the Global Innovation Index? So, all of who are doing economics, then who are major in business administration? You have anybody majoring in finance, anybody majoring in marketing. Anybody doing marketing? Then you have what else? General business administration, management. So all of you here are undergraduate students. Any graduate students? Okay, so it's a very mixed group. So in the future, if you want to learn more about innovation, I would like you to take a look at this particular index to really see. But these are very macro indicators. These are not micro indicators. So later when we talk about entrepreneurship, we will talk about micro indicators. So these are macro, these are like national level perspectives, indicators on how to measure innovation. But as you all know, like just because you have it, there's also no one big formula for a country to become innovative. For example, in the US, you have Silicon Valley. Can we actually replicate Silicon Valley, for example, here in Asia? In Singapore, they're trying, but still, Silicon Valley and Singapore will be very different. We will always have different contexts. In one country, it might work. In another context, it might not work. So we really don't have one formula for innovation. But these indicators are good predictors, again, but they are not just like when you're doing regression, even if it's, or when you're doing statistics, when you're doing correlation, just because it is not significant, it doesn't mean it's not important. Or maybe it might be, what do you call that, when you are adding or removing control variables in one model, it will be significant. And when you remove some control variables, it's not. So there's really no one formula, but they might help in assessing the level of innovation. So this is, okay, hopefully still, how many countries do you have in the ASEAN? 10, very good. So if you, during my time, there were fewer. Okay, when we started, when I was student, when I was studying ASEAN small. Okay, it's incomplete because these are, for example, we only have a couple of countries in the Global Innovation Index, but obviously we have, for example, number one in Southeast Asia, it will be Singapore, then followed by what? So Singapore is the first in Southeast Asia, followed by Malaysia, followed by Thailand, followed by Vietnam, then Brunei, then Philippines, then Indonesia, and then Cambodia. So we don't have which countries? Which countries are not included in this report? Laos, Myanmar. I think we only have 8. Okay. We have Vietnam, right? Yes, Vietnam. So here, as you can see, this is basically the Global Innovation Index for 2018. So we don't have the two economies yet. They're not, the data is not yet complete for their countries. But this is just one way of taking a look at it. So if you want to do like regional studies, if you want to do macro level studies, I would recommend that you take a look at the Global Innovation Index, and it will help you provide different backgrounds for your papers whenever you're doing industry analysis, country profiles, and all of those things. Okay, so what makes Singapore number 5 and, for example, the Philippines number 73? And so does it mean that you're bad, not? But these are just indicators that would help us provide some ideas. So how do we measure this? How is it measured? So this is, I think you'll be given a copy of the presentation, right? No? Okay. But anyway, I think I don't know. But anyway, so don't worry, it's very easy to remember. Global Innovation Index, okay? And then you can just search the, what do you call that? And search, and then you have the different reports. For example, here, I was searching for, I would just type the country, and then you can already see what they call that. You have the country here, for example, you have Thailand, and then I'll be able to download all of the information related to Thailand. What is the information included in the Global Innovation Index? So these are the we have what you call inputs and outputs. Okay, in order for the index to be computed, you have inputs and outputs. Just like when you're computing for productivity, how do you compute productivity? How do you compute for productivity? You have your outputs over. If you only have outputs and inputs, it will be outputs and inputs. So inputs you have your in economics, you have land, okay, for labor capital and resources, and now you have knowledge and all of those things. So you have inputs and outputs in the index. So in order for a country to be globally innovative, the inputs that are computed will be the institutions, the human capital, and the research, the business sophistication, the infrastructure. These are the inputs that are used to measure the innovation of a particular country. Next, we have the outputs. So we'll do them one by one and we'll take a look and compare some countries, what kind of levels they have. They have knowledge and technology outputs and the creative outputs. So this is basically how the innovation index is measured by having these 4 inputs and 2 outputs. We'll do them one by one and take a look at how it is measured. So for example here, we are going to start, for example, for the inputs. Okay, let's start with Singapore because again, you have seen in Singapore, it is number 5 in the world. So these are the inputs that are needed in order for a country to be, for the measurement of innovation. So you have here for example, this is the rank of Singapore. The input rank of Singapore is number 1 in the world. This will be the world rank, the one on top. So the income level, of course, we already know Singapore would have a very high income level. Then the efficiency. What is the difference between efficiency and effectiveness? How do you know if you are efficient? How do you know if you are effective? Yes.
Efficiency usually refers to how you use your resources.
Yes.
Mhm. Effectiveness usually refers to
The appropriateness. Okay, very good. So at least you're all you all remember. So in this case, this will be the efficiency ratio of Singapore. Then you have the population, the GDP per capita, and the rank in the global innovation rank in the previous year. So if you are going to at least it's easy for you to do data gathering. Just go to this one. And the good thing about this one, it's free. You don't even have to like subscribe or even. But anyway, the data is already here. So here, these are the things that are important when we're talking about one of the major inputs of innovation will be the macro factor, which is institutions. As we all know, institutions are very important. What are the inputs in institutions? So political environment is very important. Um, for example, Singapore has a very more or less stable compared to my country. Okay, my country right now is very popular. We're competing with Trump, you know. I don't know. It's just but that's democracy. In democracy, like majority wins. So it's always fun when we go abroad and people always talk about presidents. It's interesting. So that's one example. Political environment is a very important input. As we all know, when we're doing a business, the environment, the local environment, the national environment, the environmental factors are very, very important in managing and sustaining innovation. So as you can see, the level for Singapore, look, it's number. There are. I'm sorry. There are what do you call that? There are meanings in that one when you take a look at the report. But as you can see, the rank there is the rank in the world. Okay, when it comes to political environment, stability, safety, government effectiveness, Singapore here is number one. Then regulatory environment. What do you mean by regulatory environment? What is regulation? Anybody here taking up law? But at least you have in business, you also have courses in law, right? Commercial law, business law. Why is regulation important? To ensure ethics, yes, to ensure that we follow all of these things. So as we can see, the level for regulatory quality in Singapore again, it's very high, and then the rule of law. The rule of law here, they have a measure. They take a look at the how laws are implemented. So implementation is very important because sometimes you have very good laws, but then the implementation might not be very good. I'll. Is anybody here from the Philippines? None. Okay, that's good. So I can talk about the Philippines then. I can say both good and bad. No, no. Anyway, it's like, for example, in the Philippines we have very good laws. Okay, we have somebody said like we have the best laws, but we implementation is quite is quite because we have a very old like what do you call that parliament. So some of our laws like date back like 20 like hundreds of years ago, but they're good. But the problem again will be implementation. That's why when it comes to the rule of law, usually this is where we fall. Next we have cost of redundancy. What's the meaning of redundancy? Dismissal. I'm sorry. What's the meaning of redundancy, dismissal, salary wicks? Why do they take this as an indicator? What's the meaning of in human resources management? Have you taken a course on human resources? So when we study hiring, firing, remember it's very expensive to hire, right? What are the costs when you hire a person? The cost of training. Okay, so when you train people, do you want people to immediately move from one place to the other? No, especially sad to say, a lot of people would say like millennials or Gen Z, the Gen Zers are usually what they call that. They say that they usually move from one place to the other because again because of the opportunities. Here, the cost of redundancy. Redundancy means they would remove workers, which are like the cost of replacement. In this case, if it's easy to replace workers, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It is very cheap to replace workers. If it is very cheap to replace workers, is that good or bad? you want your workers to be very expensive. You want them, like if you replace them, it will be too expensive for you to train and everything. So in this case, for Singapore, it's very expensive. They don't want, that's why labor cost is very expensive. For example, in Singapore, if you have friends in Singapore, the salaries would always be higher. Like even the rates, of course, the purchasing power is different in Singapore, but comparatively, the labor rates are high. So you want your workers to be expensive, that it's you don't want to fire your own workers. That's the meaning of this indicator. Next, we also talk about ease of starting a business. Have you heard of the indicator from the World Bank, the Ease of Doing Business Index? Yes. So the ease of doing business index is another indicator that you can work on. I do a lot of studies on entrepreneurship right now, and one of the most important and critical factors in starting with a business is on the ease of doing a business. In the ease of doing a business, they will take the average of how many days it takes to start a business. In Singapore, how many days does it take to start a business? Ease of starting a business. Their rank is not a 96.5. I think in Singapore, in the last report, it is number one or number two when it comes to ease of doing business. It only takes less than 2 days for a person to register his own business. In the Philippines, it takes more than 60 days. In other countries, 30 days. So usually the global average for doing business is around 30 days. The Philippines is quite far. Then we also have resolving insolvency. Again, we also talk about liquidity issues, and these are all macro issues. So the insolvency issue here will be the one that is related more of treasury management and all of those things. Have you taken a course on treasury for those doing economics and finance? But it's very important for a government for any business to be liquid. What's the meaning of liquidity? We're having a class today. What's the meaning of liquidity? When a business is liquid, yes. Yes, yes, yes. So the availability of cash. Do you have the cash to sufficiently, what do you call that, continue to sustain your operations? A country should also be liquid. Okay, so in this case, Singapore, of course, is also quite liquid because if the government keeps on borrowing and borrowing, then the government's not liquid. So those are some of the indicators that they use for institutions. The other example here, the other example would be, for example, Brunei. Again, Brunei is for political stability, Brunei is also quite stable. We don't anybody from Brunei, as you all know, like for Brunei, have they don't change their governments. They have a monarchy, so basically it's very stable. And then so all of these things, as you can see, for Brunei, for rule of law, it's not so high, but then ease of insolvency, Brunei, although it has a lot of money. Again, there will be issues on monetary and fiscal policies as well because they have a lot of what they call that for oil subsidies and those things. So that's one of the parts. So we'll take a look at the countries one by one. If you want to do some, no, we will not do all of them. We'll take a look at some parts. So after this one, after one of the inputs, which is institution, we have another one, which is okay, which is now the other part. The other input will be human capital and research. Okay, anybody here from Cambodia? Have you been to Cambodia? Anybody here has been to Cambodia? Okay, very good. So here we have here for human capital and research. These are the indicators. Okay, these are the indicators that are being used by the government. So, for example, expenditure on education is it's a very important what they call that indicator of innovation. If the government spends a lot, as you can see, for example, for Cambodia, it's still lagging behind when it comes to expenditure in education. But I think this is something that they are working on. So another indicator will be government funding per pupil in secondary education. In Indonesia, if you go to like primary education, secondary education is free, right? In Indonesia. No, for state university, for state schools, public schools, is it free? For public, for tertiary, like for example, Gajah Mada State University, is it free? Gajah Mada is it? No, of course, because you have accreditation, and it becomes more and more. It's a little more compared to other schools. It will be a little more. So But usually for state, the state usually like basic education and secondary education is usually free. But of course, you have the option to study in other schools as well. So as you can see here, we have government funding, school life expectancy. School life expectancy means, you know the meaning of life expectancy, like how long, as we, for example, for Indonesia, for most of Southeast Asia, our life expectancy is now increasing. People are becoming, they live longer. So when you talk about school life expectancy, you want people to stay in school. You don't want people to drop out. Okay, so for example, here for Indonesia, maybe for Cambodia, still has a long way to go. Then the PISA scale, this one is the international exam on math, science, and on math and science. Usually Singapore scores highly in this one. Singapore and of course Japan, Korea, they usually score very highly in the PISA exams. This one is an exam on math and science. So as you can see, these are some of the indicators here. For human capital research, education, tertiary education is also very important. In the, I'm sorry, I'm in Cambodia. For tertiary education, for example, this one, again, mobility. Okay, tertiary inbound mobility. When we talk about inbound mobility, we want people also from other countries to go to, uh, to, to a host country. For example, now, the reason why, for example, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, we have a lot of international weeks is to increase the mobility. We want people to move around. Even, for example, but most students, for example, even me, like our students in school, when they talk about mobility, when we talk about outward mobility, where do students usually do their exchanges? Where do you want to do your exchange? In Europe, right? In the US, nobody wants to go to Southeast Asia because we understand that students, because for us, Southeast Asia is very near. Because it's very similar. The weather is the same. We don't have snow. Okay, I know, I know you want to see snow, right? So you want to ski. Snow is nice, day one, but after like, if you live in a very cold country, you'll cry. Okay, it's just too cold. So mobility is very important because there will be more exchanges. The reason why we're doing all of these international exchanges is because we want to learn from each other. So in most countries, like especially Europe and what do you call that, the US, they have a lot of inbound mobility. But usually that is an issue that we have in Southeast Asia. Most of the students, they would like to go elsewhere rather than go to Southeast Asia. Another important, what do you call that, input will be what do you call that? This will be R&D expenditures and the QS university rankings. These are all the expenditure on R&D, research and development. So here, for example, for Cambodia, we don't expect it a lot yet because they have very few universities right now, but it's really growing. So we also have the QS rankings. You know the QS rankings, right? Yes, and Gadjah Mada would be one of the high. It's that because I'm here, it's the top. Okay. No, no. When it comes to business, yeah, right. But Gadjah Mada has a lot of programs as well. How many faculties does UGM have? A lot. Yeah, yeah. You have a lot of faculties, but FB is one of the biggest. Do you have an idea? Mm. Ah, yes, yes. Different institutes. Yes, yes. True, true. So I think engineering, science, technology is usually quite big as well. Okay, so let's take a look at Indonesia here for human capital and expenditure. Again, it's still quite like expenditure and education still not that high. For those who know like the budget of the national government of Indonesia, majority of the budget goes to where? What's the highest allocation for budget? Infra. Infra. For example, in the Philippines, our highest is debt. We have to pay our debts. Okay, that's number one, and followed by infrastructure as well, and then education and health is something that are. So as you can see here, compared to other countries, again, the expenditure of education is not that high. So this will be for Indonesia, the PISA scores and all of those things. So, but the output rank and the input rank, okay, in this case, you can see the efficiency of what do you call that in Indonesia, input over output, output over input. It is quite, you have more output. Is this a good thing when you have a lot of input and your output is not so high? It's quite, yeah, it's not that efficient. Okay, it's not bad. Okay, it's not that efficient because usually you want very few inputs, and you want your output to be higher. So that's why we always talk about the. But again, as what I have said, these scales are also you'll have very limited variables as well because these are the only variables that we can easily quantify. And the QS rankings are also found there. The other input that is also included would be infrastructure. So as you can see, infrastructure, for example, for Malaysia, for infrastructure, it is quite high. It's in the middle, upper, above average when it comes to the level of infra. ICT is very important. ICT use. In Indonesia, it's also one of the countries where like mobile use is quite high. Mobile phone penetration is very high. Indonesia, um, Philippines would be very high when it comes to mobile phone usage. And then so online service, government's online service. When you talk, is it easy, for example, for you to apply for documents online in Indonesia, or do you have to go to the office? For example, for your passport, how do you get a passport here in Indonesia? Do you go to is it long or something? Yeah, so even in the Philippines, ours is longer, I think. So in some countries, for example, it's easy. Like in the US, how do they apply for a passport? They will just like Dropbox, or they would just have to mail it. They don't even have to have. In the Philippines, you have to go there actually, and then they will get your fingerprints and all of those things. So ICT access is very important for innovation. Then nowadays, this is a very important input to innovation. ICT, information and communications technology. So now you have courses on data science. You have analytics. Yes, so we have data science. Nowadays, we talk about artificial intelligence. We talk about machine learning, those things. We talk about financial technologies, fintech. So that's why a lot of business students now, what they do is, for example, entrepreneurship students, they are now pursuing technopreneurship. They would be working with people from computer science, computer studies, in order for them to develop their apps. Because, for example, IT students, engineering students, they know the technical side, but they are not aware of how to market, how to do a feasibility study, and this is where we come in. So ICT is very important now. Then that's why you have the e-participation. This one's for e-governance. Then the other one here will be a general infra. You talk about electricity. Nowadays, logistics is very important. All of you here, you have used online shopping, right? So, which is popular in Indonesia? Shopee or Lazada? Shopee. Shopee is more popular. Okay, for example, in that case. So, nowadays, how long does it take for the item to be delivered on average? 3 days. If you so as you can see nowadays, logistics is one of the most important topics that we study in operations management because you might have a very good product, but then it might not be delivered on time. So if it's not delivered on time, what happens to your satisfaction? You become, yeah, lonely, okay, sad. You don't have your product. So logistics. So that's why nowadays most companies they are looking for experienced people who know logistics because logistics is one of the big. It's something that we don't usually feel nowadays. A lot of people, what do you want to do for your after graduation? Yeah, what kind of job? Okay, so for example, you want to sell your own products. You will be doing all of these things. Are you going to deliver them on your own? No. Yeah. So that's why nowadays you have most companies, of course, because you don't want to buy your own trucks. You don't want to buy your own motorbikes. You don't want to buy your own planes. That's why logistics companies now it's one of the biggest and the fastest growing industries in the world. Logistics is not sexy, okay? People want to work, for example, in nice banks, in the stock exchange, or in like very nice posh offices. Logistics is not very beautiful. It's not nice. It doesn't look so nice, but it's a very important part of the business right now because with everything is online. A lot of us do online shopping. Logistics providers are now growing. That's why if you have a chance, logistics will be one very nice industry that you can also take a look at. Then, of course, you have gross capital formation. This one will be about capitalization and all of those things. Then we have here, we have GDP. Environmental performance is usually measured by ISO 14,000. You know ISO, right? So the usual ISO certification, I think UGM is ISO certified, right? The university, it is, I think, the processes. Anyway, but ISO certification is you have 9,000, and these are the two standards that you have to remember. You have 9,000 series and 14,000 series. So ISO 9,000, this means what? It's about the presence of quality management systems. It's just the presence. It doesn't just because you are ISO certified, it doesn't mean that your company is good, that your products are always great. It just means that your university, your business have quality management systems. And the other ISO certification that is very popular is known as ISO 14001. It talks about environmental certification. So when you talk about environmental certification, you talk about sustainability. What's the meaning of sustainability? Yeah, the piece. Yes, yes. Long life. What else? You talk. Yes, think about the environment. So you think about the people. You think about the planet. You have the three P's in sustainability: planet. What else? Profit and people. Of course, profit is very important because you want your company to continue, right? And then people are your most important assets, and you have the planet to take care of. So the other example here for the Philippines, in our country, again, environmental performance not so good, not so good. So, oh, electricity. This is very funny. Electricity output we're quite bad. In the in Southeast Asia, the most expensive electricity rates will be in the Philippines. Other countries will be cheaper, and like even oil. That's why I like to go to Indonesia because Grab is cheaper. Malaysia, Indonesia, Grab is much cheaper because oil for us is very, very expensive. For example, like you use liter or gallons? Liters. For example, how much is 1 liter of gasoline here? How much? The usual average. The usual gas. So that's how much in US dollars? Half a US dollar. In the Philippines, like 1 liter will be at least $1. So it's almost double Indonesia. So it's very, very. That's why we're not very efficient when it comes to energy because we import a lot. At least in Indonesia, you have oil as well. So this is for the Philippines. Then we have the other, another what do you call that? Input will be market sophistication. We also talk about ease of getting credit. Why is the ease of getting credit an important part of innovation? What's the meaning of ease of getting credit? Yes, when you borrow money, because when you are a startup, you want to easily borrow money. Because usually when we talk about innovation, it relates to starting your own business as well. Then so those are investments, and then all of the these are basically what do you call that? Related to, as you can see, the market sophistication here talks about financial and economic indicators. It talks about credit systems, microfinancing. It talks about investments and then trade. And so these are other inputs that we also take a look at. Then we also have here for Vietnam. Now we go to the other, under market sophistication, we also have what we call business sophistication. We talk about knowledge workers. Have you heard of the term knowledge worker? Who are knowledge workers? Nowadays, a while ago, we were talking about the inputs. You have land, labor, capital. So we talk about knowledge as one of the most important inputs now. When you're a knowledge, nowadays in the 21st century, you know the fourth industrial revolution, right? We're now in the fourth industrial. What's the difference of the fourth industrial revolution with the third? What's the difference? Fourth industrial revolution and third. Yeah, the Internet of Things, IoT. Very good. So, Internet of Things means that whenever you're connected, you are basically everything is now connected to the internet. Because even at home, you can now, if for example, even like your refrigerator, your what do you call that? Anything, your air conditioning, you can already remotely control it through the internet. So these are some of the things that are very important. We talk about knowledge workers, the fourth industrial revolution. So we have to really, we go beyond technical skills, but we have both technical skills and soft skills. I think this in business schools, you all learn technical skills. But what is also very important is soft skills for the 21st century, which are you have to learn how to communicate properly. So communication online and communication face to face. You have to collaborate and you have to be creative and be a critical thinker. It's much more difficult now. You have to do a lot. You have to uh, you have to do both. So soft skills and of course the technical skills are very very important. We also have here the innovation linkages. Okay, so a country like, as we can see, Singapore has very high innovation. Here, this one is the gross GERD means gross expenditure in research and development. As we can see here, gross expenditure financed by abroad. Singapore would be very low because most of their gross expenditure financing when it comes to research, it's more internal. They don't have external, for example, investors for research and development because Singapore can afford, they can do it on their own. Then they also have knowledge absorption. It also talks about intellectual property. Okay, we have what you call you have like any country would have an intellectual property and patent office, right? You know where it is located in Jakarta. I don't know, every country we have a patent office. I think here in Gajah you also have a patent. If I'm not mistaken, you have an incubator, right? A business incubator in Gajah You have a lab. Have you heard of it? I haven't been to it, but like my colleague said, that Gajah would have an incubator where they start their own businesses, and if the business is really unique, they would have what you call a patent as well. Okay, so patents. You know what patents are, right? What's a patent? Copyright. You know copyright, right? So a patent is similar to a copyright, but this is your own business. So copyright is for your own, what do you call that? For your own outputs. Patent will be something that's for your business as well. So those are the things that we take a look at. So that's for Singapore, for Brunei. Now these now are the outputs. When we talk about outputs, we talk about knowledge and technology outputs. You have knowledge creation, all of those things, knowledge impact, the diffusion. As we can see, for outputs, Cambodia would have, it's quite low. Let's take a look at Indonesia for the knowledge and technology outputs. If you want to learn more about all of this, what do you call that? All of this information here in the Global Innovation Index website, you'll be able to find how they measured all of these things. So, have you heard of this one, H-index? In Google Scholar, H-index means, okay, if you go to Google Scholar or when you you do research, like when the paper is highly cited, if for example, I will use paper A and then another author uses paper B, my paper, many people use that means if I'm the author, my H-index is very high. The H-index means of a country, it means are the outputs in this country being used by other researchers abroad. So usually the H-index, again, the US would have a very, very high H-index, and then you have, it will be followed by the UK or some parts of Europe. So that's the meaning of, in this case, are our research outputs being used? Are people using our researchers? That's the meaning of H-index. Then for the knowledge impact, it will be the growth rate, the number of certifications, knowledge diffusions, it will be all of these things. So these are now the outputs that are measured. You have all of the definitions in the Global Innovation Index. And then we also have what you call creative outputs, okay? Indonesia is known to have a lot of creative outputs as well because of the culture, and you have a very, very diverse, what do you call that, creative industries in Indonesia. Indonesia will be known for its creative outputs as well. Then we have what you call the intangible assets. What are examples of intangible assets of Indonesia? Intangible means what? Something that you can touch, you cannot touch. Cannot touch. What are examples of intangible? So the dance, huh? Culture. Yeah, like for example, your culture, the dance. Those are examples of intangible outputs. I know it's very difficult to what do you call that to measure this, but UNESCO has a way of quantifying intangible assets. So, for example, this is basically the culture. So, because Indonesia is like very, very big and it has a varied culture, the intangible assets are quite high. Then we also have creative industries and all of online creativity and all of those things. So that's for the Philippines. So that's basically the first part on innovation. So if you want to learn more about innovation in detail, which is more quantitative, I would like you to take a look at the Global Innovation Index. So that's one way for you to compare other countries. But again, what's what I have said a while ago, innovation is very innovation is there's really no one formula. As you can see, like Singapore might be the best in some factors. There are also some factors where it will not be ranked very highly as well. So innovation, we all know it's something new, something that will be improved upon. So it's more of Kaizen. It's a Japanese term which means continuous improvement. So the next part will be on entrepreneurship. For entrepreneurship, this is what we have for the definition. Okay, so all of you have taken a course on entrepreneurship, but you know what does an entrepreneur do? You want to be an entrepreneur, right? What business do you want to do? Okay, that's okay. So anybody here who wants to be an entrepreneur in the future? Yes. What business do you want to start? Okay, okay. So what products? Okay. Oh yes, and especially now with financial technologies, it's something that you can take a look at. Like, how can you relate Islamic banking with financial technologies? Because now you have fintech and all of those things. So which are that's why now it's for example, even I'll use the example of Grab. I don't have Gojek, but at least I have. For example, for Grab, you can the money like you have OVO is what's that? For the those are examples of financial technologies, right? And it's something that you can take a look at. How does Islamic banking how does it relate to all of these new technologies? How given because everybody's using the internet and all of those things, how does it relate to, for example, Islamic banks? Something that you can take a look at. So now we'll talk about entrepreneurship. When you talk about entrepreneurship, the first thing that comes to our mind will be to start our own business. But entrepreneurship goes beyond starting your own business. When you talk about entrepreneurship, it's having a mindset. So even if you're a student, even if you don't start your own business, if you have an entrepreneurial mindset, it means you are a person who looks for opportunities. Even if you are within your company, you have to also have what you call an entrepreneurial mindset because you have to think of new things to innovate, of more things to improve. So you take a look at opportunities. So when we talk about this one, entrepreneurship, you are very relentless. You are very focused. You go beyond, you want to be, you are a risk taker. And then, of course, you take a look at different opportunities. So, what are these opportunities? So, for example, you see, okay, we have fintech. How can I relate it to to Islamic banking and finance? Then you can think of a new business model. You can talk about creating a better or cheaper version. Because sometimes you already have a lot of new products out there. You just want to make yours a little better, or maybe you want yours to be cheaper, or maybe you want yours to be more expensive. It depends on the market that you are targeting. Then you can also take a look at different customers as well. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, this is again, so if you have the Global Innovation Index, another indicator of entrepreneurship is this data set. You have the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. Have you heard of this? Yes, Indonesia is part of it. The Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data, again, is similar to the Global Innovation Index. But what they do in the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data is that they interview individuals. The Global Innovation Index, as you can see, it's more macro in approach. But this one, again, it's a free data set. You can also play around with the data. If, for example, in the future, when are you going to write your thesis or your dissertation, your papers? Soon? Once you start writing, you have to look for data, right? So one of the things that you can take a look at again will be this one if your focus is on entrepreneurship. So this one's a Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data. The data in the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, the only problem with this one is the data is quite old. It's 3 years behind. The one that you can freely access from the internet. If it's beyond, for example, if it's the latest 3 years data, you have to pay or you have to contact the different countries. But the data is like, for example, now it's 2019. Data from at least 2015 and below would be readily available. So the global monitor entrepreneurship monitor data. What we have here is today I'll talk about the ASEAN Regional Entrepreneurship Report. It was done like in 2015. It was released in 2015. So in the Philippines, we are the one. My school is the one hosting the data. So we have the data. We have the actual data of all the survey. So we're part of the team for ASEAN. So if today I'll talk about the different features of entrepreneurship in ASEAN. So for this report, we only have six participating countries. We only have Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Because I think the other countries have not yet participated in the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor Survey. So usually for this survey, what we do is like we hire a firm to do the interviews for us, and we do sampling, and we have around 2,500 participants for each country. When we talk about entrepreneurship, the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data, it talks about the behavioral and attitudes of people, how open people are to entrepreneurship, and the other one will be on the framework conditions. The entrepreneurial framework conditions are similar to the innovation, what they call that, are similar to the innovation index that we had. So in this case, for the interview, in this side, for the entrepreneurial framework conditions, we interview top level people, like those who already have businesses, people in the government, people who are working, what do you call that, working in NGOs and other government entities. In the entrepreneurial behavior and attitudes, we interview people who are like actual, just anybody, they're part of the sampling. So just regular people for this one. It's not very clear, but this is what we have for entrepreneurship. We have all the macro factors. Then we also take a look at the individual factors for entrepreneurship. So we have everything is found in the website. The website here is GEM, Global Entrepreneurship Monitor Consortium data. So what we have here is, I will just show you like the different ideas that we have. Okay. So these are the results. Okay, the societal attitudes. Okay, the societal attitudes among the different countries when it comes to entrepreneurship. So here we can see like, is entrepreneurship a good career choice? Do we put high status to successful entrepreneurs? And what's the media attention to entrepreneurship? For the first column, for this one, for that column, entrepreneurship is a good career choice. Which country would have a very high, where they say that entrepreneurship, for the respondents, Philippines, like more than 80% would say that entrepreneurship is a good career choice. So that's what we say. It's good. So the people are more entrepreneurial, which is the lowest when it comes to like entrepreneurship. So that's a good career choice. I think Malaysia and Singapore. When we were doing this study, like Malaysia and Singapore, a lot of those who are interviewed, because a lot of people, for example, in Singapore, they would rather work for the government or for big companies rather than starting their own businesses. But again, it is also changing. But generally, most people, this one like the age group is very diverse. It's like stratified sampling. So generally, Singaporeans and Malaysians would have when it comes to the level of choosing entrepreneurship, it's just 50-50. 50% say it's a good career choice, and around 50% would say they would rather work in usually the government or the private sector. Here, high status. Which country provides a very high status to successful entrepreneurs? As you can see, the highest here would be Indonesia. So in Indonesia, it's Indonesia, right? Yeah, but yeah. So okay, I saw no because it's first. Okay, so but anyway, yes, of course, yeah. Philippines and Indonesia would have very high status of successful entrepreneurs because this is related to this one. This is a very interesting study that we have: media attention to entrepreneurs. So media attention here is like, are there many TV shows about entrepreneurs? Are there many like even we're looking at it like the role of TV dramas. Like, do you have any TV dramas or movies related to entrepreneurs? For example, in the U.S., there are many. So in the we don't have a data. We don't have the data here, but the data for the U.S. it has a very high, again, media attention to entrepreneurs because in the U.S. Have you heard of the TV show Shark Tank? Yes. So what is the show about? Yeah, so people would pitch their ideas to inventors. It's a very nice, what do you call that, TV show. You can just watch it in YouTube if you want to, even if you don't, because at least you can see like what ideas they have, and what ideas are being funded or not. So these are some of the what do you call that indicators that we have. Another one will be opportunities. Okay, the perceived opportunities, the perceived capabilities, and the fear of failure. Okay, this one is a general study on people in different countries. So, which country would look for opportunities? Like they see opportunities in anything that they see. The one would be the one Philippines again is quite high. Then you have Indonesia, Thailand is the highest. I think. Yeah, is it correct? Yeah, Thailand is 47. Then you have the Philippines and Indonesia, which are 45. So as you can see, those Thais, Filipinos, Indonesians, they see like this one is a social study, so sociological study. So again, it's not perfect, but this is the perception of people. They say, okay, yeah, we see that there are lots of opportunities in our countries, and which is the lowest. As you can see here, Singapore, this is now like what Singapore is trying to do. Like, how can they increase the level of creativity? How can they increase the level of opportunities? Because people are already, they quite contented. They're okay. That's also the problem usually when you're already high income. Then, just like in Japan, I stayed in Japan and I know like there was a time when for Japan, Japan was number one in the 1980s. Then in the 1990s, there was a problem, and then Japan was number. So the U.S. and then Japan, then the U.S. became number one again, and now Japan is in the ranking of the world. It will be the USA, then China, and then Japan. That's the usual problem as well when a country becomes relative. So we really cannot say. That's why, for example, for Singaporeans, they don't see a lot of opportunities because they're quite satisfied with what they have. That's why the rank here will be quite low. Capabilities, okay. In this case, the perception of capabilities to become entrepreneurs. So, who are very confident to become entrepreneurs? Which country? I don't know why we are very confident, but yeah, we have a very high level of confidence. We're very confident. We're just I think we just take risk too much. Too. It's also not good. Okay, and then you have followed by Indonesia. Then you have Vietnam. Then you have Thailand. Again, capabilities. Singapore will be quite low. That they think that they don't have the capability to become entrepreneurs because again, since a lot of them really want to work for the private sector and the government. Fear of failure. Okay, fear of failure here is what's the meaning of fear of failure? You are what? Yes, you're very afraid. So who's very afraid here? So in this case, the one with the highest will be Vietnam, then followed by Thailand will be quite afraid. So those are some of the indicators that are being used. This one is okay. Given the data, okay, so this one is a national survey. It's not a census data. A national survey of different people, different respondents from different parts of from different countries. If you take a look at this one, okay, entrepreneurial. If you take a look at this one, entrepreneurial intentions, who want to start their own business? Which countries have very high? Again, in this data, the one is very high for the Philippines, and then quite far for it follows again followed by Indonesia. The lowest again would be Singapore in this case. This will be for those who want to start businesses. We're taking a look at this one. Maybe for the Philippines, the data was in 20. If it's 2015, we collected the data in 2014. So 2014 was yeah. People were very optimistic that a lot of them want to start their own businesses. Then, okay, reasons for start. Okay, we have what you call necessity and improvement driven opportunity. Okay, although this is now where I am going to explain, like, for the Philippines, we are more, take a look at this one. Necessity, we have very high for necessity driven entrepreneurship compared to improvement driven entrepreneurship. Necessity driven entrepreneurship means you don't have any other job. You cannot work for a company. You cannot work for the government. You cannot work for a private company. Nobody wants to hire you. That's the meaning of necessity. Okay, since I cannot find a job, then I'll just become an entrepreneur, which we all know is very difficult, that you shouldn't be doing without any preparation. So again, what we found out, although the Philippines, a lot of Filipinos want to start their own businesses, but what we found out is that it's also very high in necessity driven. It means the reason why they want to become entrepreneurs is really not to become not to really improve on something. Improvement driven opportunity means this you want to become an entrepreneur to really start your own business. So as you can see, like although the Philippines would score highly on the other factors, we have found out that a lot of our would-be entrepreneurs, they are really more of necessity. But of course, we also have, it's also quite high in improvement driven. But if you take a look at this one, Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, they have very high. Although for example, for Singapore, very few people want to start businesses. However, they want to start those very few people who want to start a business really want to improve on something, really want to start their own business. So this is what we found out in this study. Like when we were comparing the countries, okay, Philippines, okay, it's very high, but then it's very low when it comes to, it's very high when for people who want to start their own businesses, but because these people want, they cannot do other things. They cannot be hired in the government or the private sector. Clear? So again, when you talk about entrepreneurship, it's really more of can you improve? What new things can you do as well? And do you want to become an entrepreneur because you cannot find a job elsewhere, or do you want to become an entrepreneur because you really want to start something new? So reasons for business exit. Okay, let's move to this one. The industries, the most popular industries will be again, which are the popular industries? Again, for businesses in Indonesia, what's the usual industry sector that's being for startups, for entrepreneurs? Indonesia, let's take a look at Indonesia. A lot are really in. Majority of the businesses, the startups are in retail trade, hotels, and restaurants. Retail trade is quite easy, right? Because in retail, what's an example of retail? You just buy and sell, right? You buy something and then you sell it. That's an example of retail. Hotels, maybe not nowadays you have this is old, you have Airbnb now. Restaurants, of course, it doesn't have to be a popular restaurant, but it's also easy to start up a food related industry. So as you can see, majority of the businesses are really in retail, followed by very few in followed by manufacturing. Okay, for this one, for the report, if you're taking a look at this report, it's very important that we have what you call an ASEAN entrepreneurial system. Given the ASEAN Economic Community in 2016, because this report was done in 2014, it was released in 2015, we don't have AEC, we're already talking about the AEC. So nowadays, how does the AEC impact the entrepreneurial ecosystem? Okay, for the last part of my, talk, we'll talk about you, okay? So we talked about innovation, entrepreneurship. Now let's talk about you. How do you actually become to have an entrepreneurial mindset? How can you become more innovative? So I told you like entrepreneurship is not just about starting your own business. It's also about having an entrepreneurial mindset. Just because you are working for your own company, for a private company or the government, it doesn't mean that you don't have an entrepreneurial mindset. When you talk about the entrepreneurial mindset, this is what we think about. The future belongs to people who think like entrepreneurs. You don't have to start your own, but it will be nice if you can start your own business. Because when you start your own business, you can become richer. Okay, and of course, it's still better. Okay? If you work hard and everything, entrepreneurship would be better if you really work hard to become for your product and services. So how does one have an entrepreneurial mindset? These are examples. You can search for this one, entrepreneurial mindset. It means like in order for you to be better and to face the 21st century, whether you own your own business or whether you work for a company, whether it's private, government, NGO, you should have this mindset. The first one is that you should have initiative and self-reliance. What's the meaning of initiative? Initiative. Yes, to start something. Like even for example now, initiative is like even if I don't call you, you raise your hands. Okay, so that's initiative. Okay, because even if nobody asks you to do these things, you work on it. Self-reliance. What's the meaning of self-reliance? Self-reliance. Independence. Okay, so these are very important things to have an entrepreneurial mindset. The other one will be flexibility and adaptability. Have you heard of the term resilience? Resilience. Yes. What is resilience? Yeah, so when you work hard, like in spite of challenges, you work very hard. In order for you to live to the 21st century, as you can see now, for you, social media is very ubiquitous. Yeah, it's very important. It's very common. A lot of the things will change. What you are studying right now will not always be useful when you will be studying in the when you are working in the future, whether you work at home, whether you what do you call that, work in any organization, it's very important that you continuously learn. Next will be communication and collaboration. You have to this is part of the soft skills. So you have to communicate even with social media, even with all of these things. You still have to know how to talk to people face to face. You still know you have to talk to people through various media, through online, offline, and all of those things. Creativity and innovation. How does one become more creative? Are you creative? Creativity is not just about, again, it's not just about arts, not just about being knowing how to draw, knowing how to paint, knowing how to dance. Creativity is again more of the innovation. Like how can you improve other things in your life, in your company, in your business? Then critical thinking and problem solving. This is very common now because you have so much information. Um, in the library, like many years, like decades ago, do you know the card catalog? Card catalog. Do you still use the card catalog in the library? Do you? No. Do you know what the card catalog is? So before, when you were searching for books long time ago, you go to a cabinet and then you look for the titles of the book. That's a card catalog. But now, do you still do that? Everything now is online. But the problem with online information is there's just too much information. Especially now in the age of fake news. How do you know which is real, which is not real? How do you put together all of this very massive amount of information? That is now the important thing that you have to learn. Like how do you become more critical of the information that is being given to you? Future orientation. This is like what we how do you see yourselves in the future? How do you see your country in the future? In one of the studies that we had, like we were in Singapore like a couple of like last month, we're talking about future orientation, and this is the problem that they have. For example, in Singapore, the future orientation would be quite low. They really don't say okay, we're okay, but they really don't see like they're not as optimistic compared to what they were like 10, 20 years ago. So the level of optimism is very important. Indonesia is very optimistic. The Philippines were always optimistic. Well, optimism means you are happy that something good will happen in the future. Then opportunity recognition. Like when you see something, for example, when you're falling in line. For example, a while ago you were having your tea. When you fall in line and you take a look at the line, how can I make the line shorter? How can I make the queue? The one like remember a while ago, all of you were having tea. So when you think about opportunity, it's not just about making money. It's about like how can I improve the system? For example, lining from if I want to get my tea, how can I improve that? That's an example of opportunity recognition. And you also have to be very comfortable with risk. Being comfortable with risk means when you take risks, I don't want you to take risks. Okay, you are in order for you should be a calculated risk taker. Remember in finance, you know how to compute for ratios and all of those things, right? In finance, you always have to calculate risk. Risk. Also in life, you always you have to take risk because if you don't take risk, you won't be able to do. You will be too comfortable in your life. If, for example, okay, I'm already comfortable in my life, I'll just watch Netflix 24 hours a day. I'll just order food online and I don't even have to go out. But that's just too comfortable. But again, as people, we have to go out of our comfort zones. Have you heard of this one? For you as students and in the future, once you start working, one of the it's a very nice book. You can also take a look at this one. The title of the book is about having a growth mindset. Having a growth mindset means you should always be able to see failure as an opportunity to grow rather than take to say that failure is because I am bad, I am a terrible person. Because people with fixed mindset, they would not change themselves. Okay, I failed, that's it. But if you have a growth mindset, if you fail, what you're going to do is, okay, I failed. For example, in my exam, I failed. Hopefully you don't. Okay, I failed in my exam, so I was not able to answer this. Those with a fixed mindset, they will just stop, and that's it. But for you with a growth mindset, you will take a look at what went wrong, and then you do it again, you correct it, and that's it. So this is what you do right now as students, and in the future when you start working in other companies, in other agencies, government offices, or when you even start your own business, and even in your own family. These are not just about for your professional lives. It also talks about you as a person as well. And one important thing now is the idea of lifelong learning. What you will learn in the university is not what you will apply when you start working. A lot of these things are very, what do you call that, are very different. Even me, when I was a student, we don't, okay, now I'll show my age. We don't have the internet, okay? And for example, SPSS, what are you using SPSS? Yeah, for those SPSS, what version are you using? Now SPSS is 20 something, but when I was student, it was version 3, 4, 5, or Stata, yeah. For Stata. Stata now is Stata 15, 14. 14. We already have 15. When I was a student, it was low. Okay, it was number Stata 4, 5. As you can see, a lot of these things change. So in order for you to have an entrepreneurial mindset, you must have what you call a lifelong learning mindset. Nowadays, it's very easy for you to learn a lot of these things. You know these websites, the MOOCs, Coursera. Have you heard of this? You have Coursera, edX, Udacity, Udemy. I would recommend that you go here and then learn something new. Me, when I was student, when I was I was studying, we don't talk about data science, analytics, and all of those things. We're not. But now, since I am doing quants, I am now learning R. And when I learned R, now we have Python. Have you heard of those things? So a lot of these things change. So programming for me, my programming language when I was student was C++. Now people are using Python. R, I learned Python like maybe 2015, no, R 2015, and now it's Python. So you have to continuously learn. Okay, so do not stop learning. And some of these are MOOCs, the massive online, they are free. If you want a certificate, then you have to pay. But if you don't have a certificate, you don't want to, I don't get the certificates. I just learn and then do them at my own pace. And then you have everything that you have to do will be related to the sustainable development goals, right? So if you start your own business, always think about sustainability, always think about the environment, always think about people, the planet, and of course, profits will be very important. And last but not least, okay, this will be the last 5 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A, and I'll let you off by 11:45. The future of work belongs to those who think like an entrepreneur. It's what I've said a while ago. You have to be innovative, you have to be creative in order for you to become a better person and a better professional. Entrepreneurship is not just about starting your own business, it's also about the mindset. And the future of work, a lot of people are talking about robots, machine learning, and all of those things. The future of work is really about you, about humans, about people. So whatever you do not forget about the planet, profits, and of course other people as well, because we have to think about our humanity. Be better persons, have an entrepreneurial mindset, be innovative, and with that, I would like to thank you. If you have some, we have a couple of minutes for 2 minutes for Q&A, and then if you have some questions, you can email me here, or you can visit me in Manila. Yes, yes.
For your time, my name is Wulan from UGM. My question is, since as I know that the definition of entrepreneurship is there is a continuous debate on it,
Yes,
and
yes.
how to the indicators of GEM is deal with it.
Yes.
And the second question is, does the indicators of does the GEM also covers the um, geographical background and also family business background and also the difference of corporate entrepreneurship and non-corporate entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Yes, so as we can see, and entrepreneurship has many definitions. So if you're going to do, for example, research in entrepreneurship, be sure that you follow like Schumpeter's, like you remember him from economics. The Schumpeterian definition of economics will be to create your own business. But we're moving towards that as well, like because entrepreneurship for me in our field, when we talk about entrepreneurship, we take a look at entrepreneurship as just starting your own business, or you also have what you call corporate entrepreneurship. For corporate entrepreneurship, it means entrepreneurship within the organization. GEM data has a lot of problems as well. Like with any data set, there is no one, for example, like with any data set, we have some issues as well with the GEM data because it's incomplete. It doesn't have everything. That's why it is what you call that. We only do it for background studies. We cannot do in-depth analysis as well. So it's a nice data for you to introduce. Usually what we do for research using the GEM data, we do a background, we use the variables that are available, and then we do in-depth studies. For example, right now we had a graduate. She used GEM data for her dissertation. She wants to do the what do you call that, the GEM for like one region of the Philippines. So what she did would be to take a look at the general data, and then out of the general data, she did her own what do you call that, data gathering as well, which is more micro in aspects. So the data, it has some issues. It's because it's not very detailed, but it is a very good way to provide a macro perspective of entrepreneurship. And again, for the definition of entrepreneurship, if you're going to do a study, you have to follow a particular author. So there are two streams. One will be entrepreneurship, so only start your own business. The other one is corporate entrepreneurship, which is entrepreneurship within an organization. Okay? Yes.
My name is Tajud Wongpasit from Mahidol University. So my question is like I really want to ask your opinion about is entrepreneurship skill and self-resilience alone can compete in this current global capitalism situation? Because
Okay.
in my country it's like an big capitalism, like big fish eats small fish.
True, true. Again, I told you like it happens a lot, but then on the other hand, you also have examples which are like, for example, even the US, because all of the big companies they started that out as entrepreneurs. So the big corporations like Facebook before is, it's not even like 20 years ago you don't have Facebook. So before then it's just started like in 2006, like 2005, somewhere in Harvard, and then it wasn't even a business model. So as you can see, big companies like capitalists and all of those things, they would really swallow a lot of the smaller businesses. But then there will always be, we're always lucky that there will be like what you call that, what you call outliers who would grow out of this. There will be a lot. That's why in entrepreneurship, the level of failure is very, very high. So it's if you really want to start your own business, it's not that easy. The entrepreneurial ecosystem should be there. So there's really no one one formula to become an entrepreneur. So if you want to start, start. If you cannot start yet, then. But for me, if you ask me, like if you want to become an entrepreneur, you have to be you cannot be a part-time entrepreneur. I would not recommend that you start, okay, I would like to start up my business, but only part time. No. Because it was very difficult. And then, of course, big businesses, they would, like, for example, Amazon is eating up the smaller, they call them mom and pop stores in the US. So in Thailand, it is changing a lot. So you have the big companies are becoming bigger and richer, and then the smaller ones, some of the smaller ones will grow, but it will take some time. So there's really no one formula. But hopefully, some of you will become entrepreneurs. If not, always support entrepreneurs. Okay. So with that, I think we have to close. It's already an X thing. With that, I would like to thank you for listening again. Thank you very much. And should we take a picture of the group? Should I stay here and then take all from here? Can we take a picture? I can just sit down here and then you can take all of them. Okay, you can stay here.